for someone like you're born in USSR, right? 1978, your president at the time, I want to say, was who? Brezhnev? Is that who it was?
Yeah, Brezhnev, yeah.
Okay, so you have, after Brezhnev, you have Vasily Kuznetsov, right? Then you have Yuri Andropov. Then you have back at it again. Vasily comes back up. Then you got Konstantin Chernenko. Then you have Vasily comes again 3 times. Then you have Andrei Gromyko. Then you have Gorbachev, and then boom. You know, obviously, hey, Mr. President, tear down that wall, and then boom, everything changes, right? What was USSR like when you were born there? What was it like living in a communistic regime?
Well, listen, I actually, it was interesting because I recently watched a series about Chernobyl, and I was actually very surprised what a good depiction of Soviet Union it was. It's American made, but I was like, wow, it reminded me all of this KGB and people following you and make sure you don't stick out. And if you say something, they come after you, and how they collect data. And every college and every school had people that constantly watching you and collecting you. And I mean, that literally. I mean, yes, it was, they had a communist person that just make sure that no one said something against the party, watching everyone. And if you get on their list, that potentially you could be someone that wouldn't be, potentially would be a problem. They will be after you. And then they try to use police state through the police, or they will try to make people, put some crimes on them. Or if they could not do that, they will use mental health, they will put people in mental health facilities. And if they cannot do that, they would use bandits, actually. It was actually all of the criminal groups, they were not part of the government, but they kind of were used by government if it needed to do that, So I think that was a very, they pretty much allow all of the orphanages to breed, and grow criminals, that went into criminal groups, but at least they were not integrated with government. Now, I think criminal groups are part of government. It's even worse, At least they had some standards, They were separated. Now it's really lawlessness. But I think that's kind of reminded me, and I actually made my kids to watch it because I thought that was a very good depiction of life. I grew up actually by Chernobyl. My father was the person who died of cancer because he was a chief engineer, helped with a lot of building and evacuation. So he had died in the age of 41 because he was actually going to the meetings like that.
Wow.
So I kind of I grew up in that era. I remember that. I was young, but that was, that's actually probably the first Soviet Union to fall apart, it's kind of show how meaningless the life is in the system.
How far did you live from Chernobyl? Because
it's
in 1980s.
It's 70 kilometers.
You were 8 years old when it happened.
Yeah.
7.5, 8 years old when it happened.
Yeah, it's 70 kilometers from Chernobyl.
That's not far.
Oh, it's very close, So and I remember when on May 1st, they had demonstrations, this is the Labor Day demonstration, it celebrates Soviet Union. They never told people what's happened. People would faint during these demonstrations. People were hiding in Germany, but in former Soviet Union, they let people go on the streets, and a lot of people felt sick and everything else. And that's how terrible. No one cared about the people. They only cares about the agenda. They only cares, make sure that we can keep us look good, and the West wouldn't know what's going on. It's all hiding, oppression, tyranny, data collection, intimidating people in submission, and telling people lies. Very strong propaganda. And I think that's why human lives don't matter in systems like that. I think it's Stalin said, life of one person is tragedy, life of millions is statistics. So it's all statistics. They didn't care as long as they can keep power, and that is very, the system of oppression, it's very hard to understand until you experience that.
Okay, so you're in Chernobyl. Pops dies from cancer, 41, living with KGB. You're growing up. What personal events happened that caused you politically to question things? I guess maybe the other question would be, how did they shape your mindset about America, about communism, about capitalism What did you think about those things growing up as a child?
Well, as a child, I was thought about evil capitalists going to come and send all these nukes and all this stuff, right?
But what did they say about capitalists?
They're the evil capital pigs, and they all care about rich people and all this stuff, and we're about equality. I mean, it's all propaganda, Karl Marx propaganda, right? You put, that you use class warfare, or you use, religions warfare, or you always put collide people together to oppress, right? Because no one wants to have the same outcomes. We're different people. Some of us want to be politicians, some of us want to be business people, some want to be artists, right? So when you force people to do something that you decide as the government they should do, you only can do it through oppression. Right? People are born to be free. We don't like to be told by someone on top. So you have to force and intimidate people. There is no other way you can force equal outcomes. That's why you can, and you will never have equal opportunities. Well, listen, I came here barely speaking English with one suitcase, so my opportunities were tough.
What year did you
in 2000.
Okay.
So my opportunities were not that easy, okay? But it doesn't matter. We're a country about, equality of rights. You have a right to pursue happiness in whichever way you want, and government cannot tell you what you should be or what you to do. But I think a lot of this is kind of getting lost. But if I think about, what's really shaped me a lot as a young person, when Soviet Union fell apart, I went to college and I studied economics, and half of my academia were
Where?
in Kiev.
Okay.
So half of my academia was free enterprise, Friedman, Hayek, and half it still was in communist, Karl Marx, But that was a very vibrant time, even though it was very bandit times, a lot of criminals. It was terrible, mob rule, but still vibrant time where there was this hope of something bright and hope of something like some democratic freedoms and some, so it was a very inspirational in some way times where, they were building new stock exchanges and founding all these different democratic principles in the country, post-Soviet countries. And being a young person at that time, I read Alexis de Tocqueville about democracy. So I read a lot of, it probably made me too idealistic about the United States. I read a lot of books of founding fathers, when I came here. So I was probably thought about, United States of this freedom, it's just kind of like when people cross the ocean during founding fathers' times, for the freedoms, that was kind of in my thought. I saw this country of freedom and this energy of that. And I was very surprised when I got some reality checks. But it was interesting to me when I got involved, with politics at the grassroots level, just being pissed off. I got involved as the Tea Party movement with a lot of old Americans, and a lot of them actually already dead, people that were involved with me in early 2000 when that's happened, against Obama and everything else. And this is a different generation of Americans. They were Americans, patriotic, hardworking, with similar values like I have. So I think it made me also kind of willing to fight with them because I truly believe and they shape me also quickly to integrate in this kind of grassroots movement of Americans that I was willing to go against my own party, start taking down politicians. I took down politicians. I took party leadership down, and I was willing to fight. But I think as a young person, exposure to a lot of older Americans with these beliefs shaped me or even stronger my beliefs that we have to fight for that.
Did you ever read Ayn Rand while you were in Russia or no?
I read it a little bit, but I think I read it here probably later. But we had it in my high school classes. We actually had Ayn Rand.
This is after Gorbachev. So after high school. So they were.
No, we had it. I think it was I tried to remember because when I first time I read it, but I think it was they had it because it was kind of they had during Gorbachev times. I graduated in 95, so it was still So it was kind of during Gorbachev and after it was the time where kind of things become more democratic and we started having this. 90s were very interesting times, And then
who was Gorbachev? Who was Ayn Rand to you guys? How did they paint Ayn Rand?
I think at that time the things were becoming more pro-American, And I think there was a time, where people start waking up from what's happening and more access to information from outside start coming, and we start talking about more about, and plus I had like a family history, like my grandfather, his family was sent by Stalin to die, because they were like landowner, and, like they sent a lot of Ukrainians, and created famine. So he always hated communists, So I had that kind of in my, in my family history. I already had people that suffered a lot from communism. So, and he says like, you always have to be free, and these people are oppressive. My father he was like a young leader. He says like all of this stuff is BS, and what they do.
Would they tell you to be quiet, but don't say anything when you go to school?
My grandfather was not quiet, and he actually was very feisty, and he was even for some time was sent to Siberia for a little bit for that. So he was not quiet. He was refusing to join the Communist Party. So he was never really a quiet person, but a lot of people were, and like my grandma, like she baptized me secretly, and she, you couldn't go really pray, but she may allow me to pray at night.
What was the religion that time when you were growing up?
Orthodox Christian,
But Russia was, so you couldn't pray that night. What was Russia like?
Well, listen, you couldn't, they have no churches, like we had to go, like she secretly brought me to priest,
Why get rid of churches? What was the reason for getting rid of churches?
Because, communists understood religion makes people stronger and less dependent on government. The same Second Amendment, why they took guns away from people. It makes you stronger individual. Why they took land from you. That's why they're all now doing the same things here. Because when you own property, you're less dependent on government. But if you have a public, government provides you all these things, it's easy to control you. And, and they know that. And that's why religion keeps you as individual. The stronger you're individual, the harder to oppress. So when you take education, if you take guns from people, if you take land from people, if you take religion from people, we become weak people, easy to manipulate. And that's what they want to turn you into puppets. So that's why they wanted to make sure the only religion is going to be government, only socialist, communist agenda.
And your God is essentially like the president of Russia.
That's right. That you have, your
similar to what Hitler did. Hitler got rid of churches as well.
Yeah, Communist Party. That's your religion.
That's your religion, yeah.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.